And I am so pleased to have on the line with me and presenting for you today, Peter Oon and Rebecca Crowe. We also refer to her as Becky, and they are going to talk to you about STEP, which is one of the Everyday Counts initiatives for this 2-year cycle that we're currently in. And STEP is the acronym for Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian. We're really pleased to have this presentation for you today because pedestrians are one of the most sensitive road users, and we had seen an increase in Ohio in recent years in pedestrian, not only crashes involving pedestrians, but fatalities. And it is definitely a focus area for us here, especially in our local system. So a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll just roll right into the presentation. On your screen, if you do not have a chat pod on the bottom left-hand corner, please look there and find the circle with the thought bubble in it and click on that, because it will activate your chat pod on the bottom left-hand corner. And what we're going to do during the presentation is keep everyone muted, except for our presenters, of course, just to cut down the background noise. And when we get to the end of the presentation, I will unmute everybody to ask audio questions. But while the presentation's occurring, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in that chat pod. Becky will be monitoring it, as will I. Peter's going to be doing the PowerPoint presentation on his computer, but we'll read off questions to him as you put them in there. So the more interaction we have from the audience, usually the more information and the better the webinar turns out as far as getting information for you that you really want. So I want to encourage you to definitely put questions in that chat pod. And again, our presenters today are Becky Crowe, she's with the FHWA Office of Safety, and Peter Oon, who's with the FHWA Resource Center. And we've hosted Peter here in Ohio before, so maybe some of you have been in his Designing for Pedestrian Safety courses that we've been very fortunate to have him teach for us. So with that, are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Well, Victoria, thank you so much for having us talk about STEP. And I just want to welcome everybody to STEP Live. I just am so happy that I've got Peter with me today. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. And, you could actually maybe say that STEP live, right? Because by the end of this, we'll be saving lives, but having people live through it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're just really excited to be here and share a little bit about safe transportation for every pedestrian. I am with the Office of Safety up in Federal Highway Headquarters up in DC. That's actually where I am today. But hey, Peter, we've got some sunshine today, which is nice.
Great. Well, I'm in the other Washington. I like to stay away as far from DC as possible, and so I'm in south of Seattle near Olympia, but I'm working from home today. And I'm with the Resource Center, as was stated, and I may have seen many of you. I travel around the country doing the STEP workshops as well as other pedestrian safety workshops.
So you're talking about traveling, Peter, and I just got back from a little trip, trying to escape the cold weather. Kiddos had a winter break, so we decided to head south. But let me tell you, we had a little bit of difficulty. Our hotel was on one side of the road, and the beach was on the other side. And there's a picture. And Peter, it was hard. It was hard trying to get the kids across that roadway because there weren't any marked crosswalks.
Yeah, it looks like there's no signals either for quite a distance. Right? I can't see any in the picture, and you've got multiple lanes there. It probably looks pretty high speed. And yeah, your kids, although I'm sure they're very smart, they're very cute too, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm sure you wanted to protect them and make sure that they safely got across to that beach there. So, but that's pretty typical in a lot of places that I've traveled to, where there are beaches or where there's attractions on one side but the hotel's on the other side. So very common, and that's a problem though, isn't it? Because people do make mistakes, and they try to dart across rather than walking a mile down to a signal. So great example. I'm glad that you were able to get back from your vacation and in one piece, though.
Yeah, we did, and it had a great time. But I think you're right. You see this situation all over the U.S. Very, very typical. And I think you bring up a good point. We've got a lot of people that are getting hit out on the roadway because crossings can be dangerous. Traffic can be pretty fast out there, and you're trying to, maneuver around those cars that are coming. So it can be. So I'm wondering, do we ask our polls now?
Yeah, I think,
Peter?
we'll ask the question and then see how many get it, how many know their data, and then we'll bring up the next slide that shows the answers. But how many people, I can't see the chat pod, but how many pedestrians does the audience think in 2017 nationwide were killed on our roadways?
Yeah, and we'll give you just a little bit of time. You've got your just an opportunity to put a number in there. But the number of pedestrian fatalities. See what we get.
Reminder is your chat pod's on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. And if you don't see it, you should see a circle with a thought bubble in it. So go ahead and click on that thought bubble, and it should open up the chat pod on the bottom left-hand side. So we have one person that said 5,000. Another person said 12,000.
Okay, good.
7,000.
5,000.
Smart audience members.
Yeah.
6,000.
So the answer is.
So yeah, you can see there it's close to 6,000 people that are killed. And as you can see on this slide, you'll see a number of shoes. And something that I always like to make sure that I keep fresh in everyone's mind is that these are people. So many times we hear numbers thrown out, the number of people killed, but these are people. And I think the shoes, this is from a North Carolina Vision Zero event where they actually bring shoes out to represent the number of people killed during the year. I think it's very powerful. I mean, don't you, Peter?
It is. I sometimes forget being an engineer and like the data, but we do have to remember that there's lives that are impacted by these numbers, and these numbers represent lives. So it's a great point.
And just another quick fact, GHSA, the Governor's Highway Safety Office, just recently had a press release, and I'll put the link in the chat pod. But unfortunately, they are estimating that 2018 is going to have the highest pedestrian fatality since 1990. So more than 6,200 pedestrians killed. So I'll make sure I put that link in there.
Yeah, that's not good news. And so we've got a lot of work to do. And so this slide, Becky, I mean, it shows the trend going in the wrong direction for the pedestrians. But we are making progress with regards to other modes, aren't we? I mean, we've been putting a lot of effort in strategic highway safety plans and other types of efforts in the other modes. And I'd say we've done some things in the past with pedestrians, but we can definitely do more, and we need to ramp up. So
absolutely. I'm
so
almost wondering if we should ask another poll. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the national numbers. I think now, since we're talking to an Ohio audience, let's have them see if they can answer these questions here. So give them a few minutes, or not a few minutes, but maybe a minute. Sure they can work quickly.
And if you just want to pick the question that you want to ask, you can just put it down there in the chat pod. The percent increase in pedestrian fatalities, and now this is just for Ohio. And then how many people died?
So Becky, in 2017, these are the numbers, and in the latest report, they did a comparison between 17 and 18, and I looked at Ohio, and they did actually increase as far as pedestrian fatalities. So
okay.
Yeah. Are we getting what are we getting as far as some answers?
I don't see anything yet.
Nothing yet.
People moving.
Yeah. Please feel free to enter your responses to the questions in the chat pod, bottom left-hand corner. You can just put down like number 1 dash and then the answer that you have for that question if you'd like. Surely somebody has an opinion on what would be a good goal for Ohio.
I think that's what we're mostly interested in. What would be a good goal for Ohio?
Here you go.
Well, we do have some smart guys. I'm telling you, we've got some really, really smart audience members. Peter, we're looking at 0, 0, 0, 0. We had a 10%. So just, I like seeing those zeros. Those are really, really good.
Yeah, I think that 10% was in response to question 1.
Oh, I see it. You're right. So the increase is 10%. How many people who walked died? 200. How many people who walked were seriously injured? We've got an answer here of 400. So, Peter, you want to give us some of that information?
Yep. So the question for the percent increase in 2017 was 12%. And as far as the people who died that walked, it was 146. And for number 3, it's 568 seriously injured. But the more important question that everyone, I think, agreed is that a good goal for Ohio is 0, the same goal that I'm sure everybody would have for their family. And so therefore, maybe most of them knew that Ohio was a towards 0 death state. Which is great, and so I'm glad to see that effort. So, but we're going to have Victoria maybe speak to this slide and some other efforts that are happening in Ohio that can help with this problem.
Yeah, one thing that we have available here in Ohio that is pretty unique is we have our Active Transportation Academy. And this is offered for any local public agency, and you can partner with community partners to request training in a number of different topics, including complete streets implementation, advocating for active transportation, creating that Vision Zero active plan. We even have community traffic calming, and of course, getting into the walk and bike audits, looking at health and equity in active transportation. That's been one of our most popular courses. So it was introduced about a year ago. And then we have other courses that have been out there for a while but are still very relevant, and people are still requesting them, and we'd be happy to bring these to your community as far as crossing guard training, walking school bus training, and you can even engage your teachers. We have safe routes to school lesson plans that were developed that you can provide educators in your community, so these are lesson plans that are already made and are set that they can incorporate into their curriculum that meet the Ohio education standards for the various grades that they were created for. So I would definitely encourage you after the presentation, in addition to all the resources Peter and Becky are going to give you, to check out the Active Transportation Academy, because we can bring this training right to you at no cost. All you have to do is request it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Victoria. I think you all really have a robust program, so that's really exciting. Guess we did have a really quick question, Peter. Was there a comparison for the Ohio data for rural versus urban crashes?
I think the Ohio DOT can probably get that data. I don't know if that was in the GHSA report, but that's a good question, and I think the state, the data guys, can probably break that down. Is that correct, okay, Victoria?
We sure can. And I'll get that information and have it sent out after the webinar to everybody who registered.
Great. So most of you all have probably heard about Everyday Counts. That is our program sponsor, STEP, Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian. And it's really Federal Highway's tool to advance innovation in a very short time frame. We often like to say leap, not creep. I mean, for over a 2-year period, we are really trying to push out many different innovations that shorten the delivery process, improve safety, reduce congestion, and improve environmental sustainability. So those are really the different categories. And let's see, for this current round, I believe we have 11 innovations. Is that right, Peter? So we have a lot of different innovations. STEP is one of those. And one of our Spectacular 7, which you're going to hear about very, very soon, was road diets. And that actually started way back in 2015, and it has kind of evolved into our new packages, and it's a part of STEP today. So we're just super excited to be in round 5. And over the next 2 years, we'll be providing technical assistance to states and locals to advance STEP.
Great. Thanks, Becky. And yes, road diets, there's a full-day workshop on that. I think I remember doing a presentation in Ohio, and so that is still offered, but it'll be under the STEP. So. But I think we want to transition now maybe into a little of the background as to how STEP got started. And so I'm going to get a little more technical, not too much, since this is just a 45-minute presentation. But it all started back in 2005, early on when this report came out. Hopefully everyone, or a lot of people, are familiar with it. It's the safety effects of marked versus unmarked crosswalks at uncontrolled locations. And what this report found was that just marking crosswalks alone by themselves in certain situations could actually make the situation worse for pedestrians than if they didn't do anything at all. And so on 2-lane roads, no significant difference in the crash rate, but on multi-lane roads, depending on ADT and whether there was medians and the number of lanes, you could actually expect more crashes on roadways where they had over 12,000 ADT with no medians, or over 15,000 ADT even with a median, if all you did was put a marked crosswalk out there. And so people thought, well, then I won't put marked crosswalks out there on those type of situations, right? Well, that's not what the study was saying. It actually is saying that you need to do more than just a marked crosswalk in those situations. And in the 2009 MUTCD, they changed the language, added a section with regards to new marked crosswalks. New marked crosswalks alone without other measures designed to reduce traffic speeds, shorten crossing distances, enhance driver awareness of the crossing, and or provide active warning of pedestrian presence should not be installed across uncontrolled roadways where the speed limit exceeds 40 miles per hour and or either in those situations with more than 4 or more lanes, and then with ADTs of 15,000 or 12,000 without a median and 15,000 even with a median. The key thing here is that those other measures to reduce traffic speeds, shorten crossing distances, enhance driver awareness of the crossing, those are important, and those are the treatments that we're going to be getting into that help with regards to that, those additional treatments in addition to just marked crosswalks. So the study back then in 2005, often referred to as the GEAR study, it did have a table in there with regards to the ADT, the speeds, and the number of lanes, and it talked about candidate potential, and then also not marking. So C, P, and N. They just use these the letters to designate what they should potentially do. What we did under the STEP, the last round in 2018, was develop this guide, the Guide for Improving Pedestrian Safety at Uncontrolled Crossing Locations, made a similar table to the GEAR study, but then actually recommended, and these are just guidelines, these are recommendations for some different treatments. So let me give you an enlargement, and then you'll be provided the PDF for these, for this presentation today, so you can easily access the hyperlink to download the guide. But you can see here that you've got the ADTs, the speeds, and then the number of lanes, and then the recommended, what we call the Spectacular 6. And you may have picked up that we mentioned the Spectacular 7 earlier, and I'll explain why that is now. But back then in round 4, we had the Spectacular 6, which would help with these crossings at uncontrolled locations. Now that's the other thing, uncontrolled locations, meaning no signals, no stop signs, okay? Because the majority of crashes happen at crossings, and a high percentage happen at uncontrolled locations. In this round of STEP 5, we are including crossings in general at all crossing locations, even at signalized locations. So we are going to be bringing in the leading pedestrian interval for signalized locations. Now, some of these treatments here also can be used at signalized locations, but when we developed this guide at that time, it was mainly for uncontrolled locations. The guide also goes into a 6-step process with regards to what you can do to improve pedestrian safety, which starts with the data collection, doing inventories, crash analysis, and then step 4, which is the selecting countermeasures, which I'm going to just quickly introduce you to the spectacular 7, and then looking at your design guides, resources, other types of opportunities, standards that are out there. And then step 6, which is actually implementation and opportunities and how to overcome barriers. So great guide. We recommend that you would download that. But as mentioned, I'm going to mainly be focusing today on the spectacular 7, with the leading pedestrian interval being more for signalized locations. So those 7, crosswalk visibility enhancements, raised crosswalks, pedestrian refuge islands, the RFB, which is back, and we're very happy that it's back, the PHB, pedestrian hybrid beacon, road diets, which has been around for a while, and then the LPI. Okay, so let me just quickly go through these. The crosswalk visibility enhancements, great crash reduction factor. It has a range between 23 to 48. And the reason why there's a range is because we try to incorporate as many other types of countermeasures into this, such as the signing, such as curb extensions, curb radii, lighting, markings. And so it covers sort of multiple countermeasures, so there's subcategories within the crosswalk visibility enhancements. Great research on the gateway with regards to the in-street sign. You'll see that up in the upper left-hand corner where they're using it as a gateway, multiple signs. This is a low-cost treatment. So there's some additional research that's happening in Michigan and Florida with regard to those. So we'd love to talk to you more about that in the future in our workshops. The raised crosswalk, 45% crash reduction factor, works great, especially on the slower, 2 to 3 lane roads, slower speeds, but there are some, considerations like snow plowing and so forth. So all these super treatments, they do have some limitations, and we talk about that. You're not going to put raised crosswalks on 45 mile per hour roadways. And so we will talk about in some of the treatments in the workshops, sort of where the appropriate applications are as well. Pedestrian refuge islands. These have been around for a long time. I call them the goodie but the oldie but the goodie. 32% crash reduction factor. But it's a great, for especially when you have a 2-way left turn lane there to provide some protection, breaks up that crossing, so pedestrians only have to look in one direction and then in the other direction to cross the roadway. Very effective but underutilized, we believe. Now the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, it's back. We're very happy that it's back, and many of you guys are probably familiar with this, and we do have a new interim approval 21, so 11 is out. I suspect that Ohio probably did a blanket statement statewide, like a lot of other states, to have all agencies under that to be able to use interim approval 21. I've got the link there that you can take a look at that, but just a couple of highlights with regards to the interim approval. You do have to have 2, one on each side of the roadway. Now, if you have a median, as in this situation, you can go ahead and put that in the median. But you do need to have one on the left and the right side, and these are best used on multi-lane roadways to get drivers' attention from quite a distance back to let them know that there is pedestrians wanting to cross at that roadway. Once again, these are, this isn't an interim approval. I just a few months ago heard about a situation where they were using, they had put some of these out on a 6-lane roadway, high speed, even with the advanced advanced signing with the RFB. So they had 4 altogether in one direction, and they had some fatalities. So there is a upper limit as to where these are going to be able to be used at. We're still learning a lot. So with that, you do want to be careful with the application of these. Usually 30 to 35 miles per hour, maybe even 40, but if you've been using them a lot. but making sure you have the proper installation that would work. So these also do, interim approval 21 state that the flash period shall be immediately initiated each and every time a pedestrian is detected, whether through passive detection or push button activating. So that's what I love about this. You push it, they get that signal indication to drivers that the pedestrian is wanting to cross. There's no delay on this. Now, I give that example with regards to the 6-lane high-speed road. Those type of roads really, many of them, you're probably going to have to go to the pedestrian hybrid beacon or a signal. But the pedestrian hybrid beacon I really like because it really does a good balance between pedestrians and having vehicle progression as well. And so 55% crash reduction factor of pedestrian crashes here. This is how the phasing is. You can see here on the wigwag, that's where the vehicles, they stop. If the pedestrian is cleared, they go ahead and proceed. So it's a great application with regards to mid-block crossings, especially. You can actually coordinate this with signals. A lot of agencies, they will do it during peak hour, coordinate, and then do a hot response on off-peak hours so that pedestrians get the signal fairly quickly and not having to wait. There is one other point that I would like to make with the pedestrian hybrid beacon. We're seeing across the country, some states are thinking that the guidelines in the METCD for pedestrian hybrid beacons is actually a warrant. Now, there is a signal warrant. I've overlaid that, the minimum number of pedestrians needed per hour, 93 to put in a signal. But for pedestrian hybrid beacons, these are guidelines. They're not warrants. And as far as the national, now some states, they've actually made it more restrictive and they made it a actual requirement to have minimums, which we would not recommend that you do. I think you always want to allow for engineering judgment. But just to let you know, just to note that the tables in the METCD are guidelines for that 20. So maybe you have 18, or maybe even 10, but you've got a situation you want to put a PHB in. Using that engineering judgment, doing that engineering study, you're allowed to do that. And oftentimes there's latent demand. So anyways, there is some flexibility with that. And with that,
Hey,
I'm going to have Becky. Yes.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to talk about the success story that we have in Florida. They have been using PHBs along Hillsborough Avenue, and they installed those in 2015, and they were having a big problem with crashes. I mean, up in the double digits in terms of fatals. So you can see their crashes from 2010 all the way down to 2015. And after they installed these 3 PHBs, they had a significant reduction. So just a lot of success using those PHBs in Florida. So we love spreading that information around. The next, I guess, and final step countermeasure that we're working to advance are road diets. I've been working with road diets for the past 6 years. I know we have several of those in Ohio, and I believe we've done some training up there. But you can see that 19 to 47% reduction in crashes, and especially when you're going to include that median there. It really does provide a safe refuge for pedestrians, and just very inexpensive, especially if you have an overlay project and it's just a matter of restriping the roadway. We do have a lot of good guidance for road diets when it makes sense to put those out there. We've developed the informational guide that's available online, and you can download it. And then we have a number of case studies similar to the Florida Hillsborough Avenue study. We have a lot of case studies where they've implemented a road diet or a roadway reconfiguration and had some really great results. There are a lot of considerations in terms of road diets, when to put those in. First and foremost, there's safety. Operations were really kind of focused on the peak hour when you're looking at a road diet. And you can see we've got this great diagram graph. This is actually in our guidelines, but federal highways typically gives a number between 20,000 ADT, but you can see that they're going all the way up to 25,000 in Seattle, because they are looking at all road users, not just vehicular. And these road diets are really giving us a lot of great benefits. Another thing that I'd like to bring up in terms of intersections is roundabouts and road diets they just work so well together. The dog bone design, we're seeing it used all over the country. Just a really safe design to consider. And then something that we always like to bring up with road diets is that you really need to make sure that you focus on those signalized intersections and make sure that they are working properly after you reconfigure the roadway. So with that, I think we have some fun, don't we, Peter?
Yeah, I think the audience probably is wanting to maybe take a little bit of just like in a live talk show, they always have music, right? Music always makes people happy.
I love music.
Yeah. So we got an original. This is the #1 music video on the Engineers Billboard charts. It's actually written and sung by our own Wayne Emmington of Federal Highways in the Main Division Office. And so let's go ahead and enjoy this. Hopefully this works.
Walking down a busy street looking for a cat to feed. If only there were flashing lights, rectangle shape, they blink at night. Refuge Island, cross that way, put transportation every day. Hang those lamps and light it up. Keep it simple, I love that song. Dreams of Frogger, or maybe a jogger, or maybe an engineer. Just trying to walk from A to B here. Service tensions, race crosswalk, look both ways before I jog. Give this road a diet, I do declare. People might walk anywhere. Not everyone here owns a car, so here's your chance to be a star. Look, Miss like where people cross. Take away and tell your boss. Dreams of a Frogger, or maybe a jogger, or maybe an engineer. Just trying to walk from A to B here. Hybrid beacons just for you. For some roads only this will do. LPI means pet walkers. Fewer crashes, fewer hurts. You can help keep folks alive. Sign yourself up for EDC 5. Safe transportation for every pet. Stomach safety from a friendly bed. Dreams of a Frogger, or maybe a jogger, or maybe an engineer. Trying to walk from A to B here.
All right. Did that come through there,
It
Becky?
did. I feel like we need to clap.
Yeah, that was great.
All right. Yeah,
That
great
was
job
great.
by Wayne Emmington. Love that song, and we're actually trying to get him on Jimmy Fallon to sing with. So, but,
hey, we got some claps in the chat pod, so. So I
All
hope
right.
everybody got a chance to maybe play a game of Frogger as we were waiting for the webinar to start. But there is method to our madness. The reason that we put Frogger up there is because the main point that we're trying to make is that it's very similar to real life. When a pedestrian's out there, they're trying to find a gap in traffic, look both ways. If people are making a lot of turning movements, they get impatient, they're in a hurry, it's difficult. So, and in the past, when Peter and I have actually used Frogger in training environments in person, you can see people getting very nervous. They're trying to move Frogger through. And so what we're trying to get the point across is that we're just trying to make it easier on everyone, on the pedestrian and on the vehicular traffic, so that we can all, be in the same environment safely. And I think, Peter, you've got some pretty good diagrams, so maybe or maybe go over some laws and then kind of give some examples out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I think we learned with the Frogger game, though, is that as everyone wants to get the high score, because we did have a prize of gummy frogs, that they were rushing. And how often do you rush when trying to catch that bus? Or I hear it's pretty cold in Ohio right now, and they don't want to wait long to cross the road, so people take chances. So that's, I thought, another interesting human factor aspect with regards to Frogger can help teach us a lesson on. But you're right. I want to get into a little bit of the Ohio laws. Some of you guys may be familiar with this. I don't know how many of you guys actually look up pedestrian crossing laws when you visit other states. I suspect very few of you. I have to, because that's part of my presentation when I go to places. I find that most people typically don't. But the laws do make it somewhat challenging in some situations for pedestrians. And so there's some good information here. Important one here, I think, is in point 3, where I've got that highlighted. Pedestrians must yield the right-of-way to vehicles, trackless trolleys, and streetcars when crossing outside of a marked crosswalk or an unmarked crosswalk at an intersection. Okay, so that means that pedestrians actually can cross mid-block crossings. It's just that the pedestrians have to yield to the vehicles, not the other way around. So in some situations, vehicles have to yield to pedestrians within a marked crosswalk, or even at an unmarked crosswalk. So now there's, at intersections, the sidewalk is a continuation of that. The sidewalk, let me start that over again. When you have an intersection, you have sidewalks on both sides, and you have a unmarked crosswalk in that intersection, because it's just a continuation of that sidewalk, and drivers are supposed to yield to pedestrians. But many people don't know that. They feel like if it's not marked that they have the right-of-way, and that's not the case. Even unmarked crosswalks, pedestrians have the right-of-way at those intersections. And so that's something, though, that because we don't mark every single intersection for crosswalks. I think it's dependent upon many different factors, and that's what we go into with regards to the the step guide, as well as in the training that we do. The other last point here, the last bullet, it says where traffic control devices are in operations, pedestrians may only cross between 2 adjacent intersections in a marked crosswalk. Okay, so there is a situation where a pedestrian actually can get ticketed if they cross mid-block, and that's if you have 2 signals and there isn't a road in between those 2 signals. They have to actually go to one of those signalized locations to cross, which brings up this point, which we see a lot. It's like those signals, okay, there's some spacing here. It could be a half a mile apart, mile apart. So question for the audience. We have a question
that came in. Can I interrupt you real quick? Because it kind of relates to the last slide. It says, why does third bullet say pedestrian must yield in unmarked crosswalk?
Pedestrians must yield to the right-of-way to vehicles outside of a marked crosswalk or an unmarked crosswalk at an intersection. So if it's an unmarked crosswalk,
pedestrians need to yield.
Oh, that's a very good point. I've always, so let me take, that's, so it sounds like in this situation, wow, in most states, it's just that the pedestrians, that's, so maybe I have to take that back. Very good catch on somebody's part. Because the law in Ohio says, or an unmarked crosswalk at an intersection, pedestrians must yield to the vehicles. I think in every other state every other state law that I've seen, it's never been that way. It's always pedestrians, the vehicles yielding to unmarked or pedestrians in unmarked crosswalks. So I think I just probably looked at that very quickly and just assumed that was the case. So that's a very good point. That may be a law that needs to be changed here, or something that might be worth looking into. And make sure I got that, I copied that right.
Yeah,
a very
the
good
city
catch.
of Columbus is putting in the chat pod that it should say outside of, in front of the unmarked crosswalk too. And another person is saying that they agree with the point above. They think it's semantics. So what I can do after this webinar is I'll make sure to pull the actual Ohio Revised Code down and send it out to everybody to make sure that they have the exact wording. So we don't want to trip you up on, wording from a law. We know people fight about laws for a long time after they're written.
Yeah, no.
That's why we have the whole legal system. So.
Yeah, very good catch, though, because the way that you could read that, I mean, the way that I just read that, you're right. It says pedestrians must yield. So, but which in all other states that I've seen is that pedestrians at an unmarked crosswalk at an intersection, the drivers are supposed to yield, both because it is a whether marked or unmarked. So we'll take a look at that. Thank you for whoever wrote that comment. So in this situation, though, here, I guess, can you legally cross at A and B, in those situations? I don't know if we get some comments in the chat pod on this. Are we getting some responses there, Becky, Victoria?
Not yet, but it looks like at A, it looks like there is a continuation of a street, correct?
Yes, there's a T intersection there. And so based upon how we're interpreting what we just read, maybe there's some confusion. So yes, if it's not marked, then maybe the pedestrians have to yield to the vehicles. But in every other state, even though it's not marked, the drivers are supposed to yield to the pedestrians. Now in B, there's less, based upon what was written there, and it's pretty standard across the country in a lot of states, that because there's no roadway in between those two signalized intersections, pedestrians are not allowed to cross at B. They have to go to one of those signalized locations, which, once again, could be a mile apart, could be, a couple miles apart. How many are willing to go that far to go to a controlled crossing?
And we had a lot of those in the chat pod, a lot of no's, so you got a lot of correct responses.
Okay, great. So they understand that point, and we're going to have to take a look at or here you can see that on A, it's marked crosswalk. They've got the vehicles have to yield to the pedestrians. B, pedestrians yield to the vehicles. And at C, we're going to have to look that up to see how the actual language on that is. So, but how many are willing to walk out of their way to a controlled crossing? Saw this earlier. This is actually about a half a mile between those two signals. You can see here there's some apartments right sort of in the center. And if they want to get across that street, and this is a 45-mile-per-hour roadway, 4 lanes with 2-way left turn lane, okay? How many of you are willing to walk in the system street view of that location there? How many of you guys are willing to walk 50 feet out of your way or 100 feet? 500 or 1,300. Maybe we can just wait a few seconds to get some responses of what people are willing in Ohio, how far they're willing to walk out of their way to go to a controlled crossing. And you can see there's a bus stop on the other side, and it's hard to even see those signals way down there. I suspect many are.
I say while you've got your responses coming in, Ron Garcheski, who's the safety engineer at our Ohio Division office, put the Ohio Revised Code section in the chat pod for everybody. It's 4511.48, right of way yielded by pedestrian. It says every pedestrian crossing a roadway at any point other than within a marked crosswalk or within an unmarked crosswalk at an intersection shall yield the right of way to all vehicles, trackless trolleys, or streetcars upon the roadway. So there you go.
Okay. So that it is consistent with other states. I think the way that the language that I pulled it from there's a website that shows all 50 state crosswalk laws, and I think they probably just typed that in inappropriately. So I will have them change that. Thank you for that.
And you've got a lot of B's, Peter. You've got a lot of people saying B, C, just so that you get an idea of what people are. And then someone wrote in there with no children, A.
Yeah, so it varies based upon the volume. Is it peak hour? How fast are the cars coming? How many cars? And that's why in that table, so great. Most people about 500 to, and then some willing to even go 500. I think it depends on conditions. But that's about right. Typically what I get with regards to people willing to walk. Some people aren't some people aren't even willing to walk like 50 feet in some situations, as someone admitted. And so, but this is where our table, our step treatment guide sort of comes in handy, because you do want to provide, some treatments. Who's going to expect those people, to go to those control crossing locations when, most of us wouldn't. And so here's a situation. Maybe we can get some people to put in, what type of treatment would they install. It's a 35-mile-per-hour roadway, 4 lanes with 2-way left turn, ADT of 15,000. So what would be maybe some recommendations as to what the type of treatments that you would put in here? Maybe we can get some quick responses. And I'm going to try to, we're a little bit on, we want to leave some opportunities for questions as well. So go through this. Are we getting any responses, Becky?
Looks like we've got an RRFB with a pedestrian island.
Okay, great.
Ped Refuge and RRFB.
Okay.
A road diet.
Okay, great. So it looks like they're pulling from the table. I should have probably showed which square that's going to come from, but it looks like they're pulling from the appropriate. Now that 15,000 is really on that boundary, and so they may even bump it up to greater than 15,000 in some situations. But so some engineering judgment there, but at least they're getting the appropriate treatments there, sort of the higher end ones. Great. By the way, is it more challenging? We tell people to go to intersections or signalized locations, but is it better to cross mid-block or at intersections? At mid-block, you're only having to look at traffic in one direction and then the other direction. But at a intersection, whether uncontrolled or signalized, you do have more turning movements that you have to be aware of. So 4 different zones that you have to be looking at rather than just 2. I want to share this example. This is in Tukwila in Washington State. They have a mid-block crossing that they installed just 300 feet from the signalized location. There's a bus stop on the far side and a Bartels on the near side. And every pedestrian that I watched, I sat there for about 20 minutes and observed people crossing. They all went to the RFB rather than the signalized location. I think part of the reason being is that they were getting a hot response. So this is the street view. There was an RFB, the median island, very well done. And there was really no delay to the vehicles backing up into the intersection. So a great application where it wasn't a steady, constant flow of pedestrians. It was just a constant, maybe every 5 to 10 minutes, pedestrians crossing, and it didn't impede the traffic. And so great application, vehicles were stopping. But if you do go to the one treatment that we want to talk about with regards to the signalized intersection, and they could probably improve it maybe at this location in Tukwila, is the leading pedestrian interval. It's a very simple concept at signalized locations. It's at a 59% crash reduction factor, but what it is basically giving the pedestrians a 3 to 5 second head start so that they can get established out into the intersection, so that the drivers, whether left turners or right turners, can see them and realize that they have to wait for the pedestrians. So allowing them to get established. There's some places that drivers are a little more aggressive. They're just wanting to make those turns and get going, and they don't even allow the pedestrians to step off the curbway. And so allowing with the LPI and maybe a no turn on red as well can also go well with this. Can be a good combination and effective. So there'll be a lot more information coming out on LPIs shortly. So that is the Spectacular 7. Once again, the LPI being at signalized intersections, while all the others are in the guide for the improving pedestrian crossings at uncontrolled locations. And so with that, I'm going to have Becky, you're going to maybe just remind us once again.
Well, sure. I mean, thank you all for learning more about STEP today, but we always like to end with this slide so that, again, you know, in Ohio, that was 146 people. These are individuals that were just trying to make their way home or get to work, and whatever we can do to make travel safer for all users, you know, we really need to do. So I hope that you learned a little bit more about the STEP countermeasures and can get some of the links and some of the information that we shared, and we're always available to provide assistance. But I guess there's our contact information and a lot of websites. So Victoria, I guess they can download this presentation if they need that. Correct?
Yeah. Yes, I will be sending the presentation out to everybody after the webinar is completed. And I'm also going to go ahead and unmute the phone lines now so people can ask questions through just the regular phone line or their microphone. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. If you've got a party going on in the background, tell them to hold it down. So let me go ahead and start that process. And then as I unmute everyone, I'll move down the line here. You can feel free to start asking questions of both Becky and Peter. And I want to thank you guys for a great presentation today.
Thank you.
All right, don't be bashful, guys. This is your one chance to ask them the questions you've got. So.
And if you don't ask the question, maybe I might start singing, and you don't want that because Wayne sings much better than I.
Are you taking a stack or just anybody who speaks?
Anybody that speaks.
I'm in Talmadge, Ohio, and we have a circle, which is creates quite a bit of problems for a number of reasons. It was one of the high traffic accident areas because of people looking to get onto the circle and other people banging into them from behind, thinking that they've already gone. But they also hold events in the middle of the circle. There's a church there, and so some people get married there, but there's other events that are held there, music events and things. So it's very difficult I'm not sure what kind of things can be done to make getting access to the circle easier, and they usually have to hire police and do it. Or even for people getting around the circle, if you want to make more traffic within the area around there, the businesses and that foot traffic, people are, the circle, they're usually not looking maybe to the right if someone's crossing the street in front of them, but they're looking to their left to see if they could be getting on. So I don't know, any suggestions on those types of things would be useful. Thank you.
Thanks. And we have everybody unmuted now. So, whatever other questions you have. Peter and Becky?
Yeah, so what I'm understanding is this is a traffic circle, not our modern roundabout, because they're holding events inside. So I'm not sure how large this is, but if it's an issue with regards, it sounds like there's a lot of rear-enders. I don't know the traffic volumes and the details, but if you're wanting to allow pedestrians to get to the circle, which, once again, I'm not really sure, based upon the, I'd have to take a look at it, but a PHB would maybe help with regard to that because it will allow progressions for pedestrians to get across, but also vehicles then to proceed. RFB in that situation, because it's activated right away, I don't know if it would be that effective depending on the volume. It just, so PHB to help with the progression of vehicles as well if we wanted to get them through. But circles are not something that I'd probably have to refer to my roundabout specialist, Hillary Eisenbrand, for more of the details. Just some initial thoughts there.
Yeah, Peter, if this is Victoria, if I could jump in real quick. The situation you're describing there in Talmadge kind of sounds like the square that they have. It's not really a circle, but it's a square with the courthouse in the middle of it over in Licking County. And I know that they did extensive renovations here in the last few years. So you might want to reach out to Licking County and specifically the city of Newark to see the types of pedestrian treatments that they put in there, because that center section they hold festivals in it, like you were saying you do in your large circle there in Talmadge. And if you have a church in the middle of it, it's probably pretty big. So, thanks.
Yeah, it's pretty large, and it's like one of the high traffic areas because there's 8 folks coming out of it. But yeah, I'll look at Newark. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would recommend if there's any way with the approaches to the circle, we have a number of these in Richmond. If you could design them, and it could just be with paint, just to slow them as they come into the circle. At least you're bringing that speed way, way down.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What other questions do we have for our presenters? We still have some time. Everybody's unmuted. Don't be bashful. Well,
Victoria, while we have just a little, I guess a minute or so, I would like to, under this list of resources under PedSafe, we just developed a new section under PedSafe just for uncontrolled crossing locations. So Peter did a great job of working through the table based on the number of lanes and speeds. Well, we've actually automated a lot of that in PedSafe. You can go in, put a location, and click on uncontrolled crossing locations, and it will actually help you decide what types of countermeasures are appropriate. So just wanted to point out that resource to everyone.
Sounds great. Okay, well, it sounds like we don't have any other questions from the audience, so you've either answered every question they have or they're thinking hard about them and they'll be emailing you later. So thank you everyone for being on the webinar today, and especially thank you to our fabulous presenters, Becky and Peter. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this for us here in Ohio. And I know that the information you've shared will be put to very good use, and hopefully we can continue to drive those numbers down and get to zero. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Victoria.
Have a good rest of your day.